This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. We're now in season 6. Thanks to all of you tuning in and sharing the podcast with your friends to keep the momentum going. This podcast is dedicated to all things horse and all things that uplift equine well-being and welfare. And I'm having down-to-earth conversations with equine professionals about the little things that move the dial slowly but surely towards a better world for horses. You'll find all the episodes, 93 and counting now, on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for being here and enjoy the ride. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. This will be one of the first podcasts of 2023, and I'm stoked that you're here and listening and hopefully enjoying the new season 6. And today on the podcast, I am very excited to introduce, or a lot of you probably know her work, Tara Davis. Thank you for being here today on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here and talking with you.
It's wonderful to have you. So you're the Unbridled Goddess, and I absolutely I just love that, first of all. And I would love, I'm sure there's listeners out there that know you, but also for those that haven't come across your work, I would love you to just share a little bit more about what you're up to and who you are. How did you get to this point?
Oh gosh. Well, I always have to say my brand name, Unbridled Goddess, I always have to give the real credit to my mare Misa. She's the unbridled goddess. She's my muse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just her person that's learning from her. But so I'm a horse trainer based out in Northern California. I'm in McKinleyville in Humboldt County. And I specialize in working with horses who have experienced trauma and rehabilitating them. Through that process, I've come to a kind of unique blend of both spirituality and science-based horsemanship, which, I just put into practice here on my little 5-acre ranch with my family. We have our herds of horses and kind of just created this little sanctuary of healing and growth and learning.
That sounds so beautiful. And I did go through and I saw Misa, like her photo. And of course, as someone who has a mare kind of leading the way in her life, I can really relate to that. One of the words or phrases you used was like, horses are my North Star.
Yeah.
And that really hit home for me, this sense of, they're guiding the way, they're leading me down that path. And I know that you've had things happen in the last little bit. You were sharing a little before we started about a grieving process that you're still in with one of your horses. And I hope we can touch a little bit on that today. As we'd shared before the podcast, this sense that we don't really talk about this a lot and how potent it can be. Before we get into it, I would love to know a little bit about your training style and maybe how you came to, I know for so many people, it's like, oh, how do I train? What do I blend? What's going to work? So I would love to hear what you use and why.
Yeah, I feel like I came to it through a really organic place. I rescued my mare Misa back in, oh gosh, that was almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I think now. Time flies, it's wild. But so I rescued her, and kind of I had worked with traumatized horses in the past, and you just kind of always, I used traditional horsemanship methods, pressure and release, and I figured that I could get through to her and fix her in that way, and was just wildly unsuccessful. I couldn't even get within an acre of her to
Wow.
even try to start that process. And I had made the promise to her that I would never, she had had to be roped to be caught previously. And I made that promise to her early on, like the day I met her. I said, I will never do that to you. I'll never hobble you. I will never take away your ability to leave.
Yeah.
And so I I had made this promise, I had made this commitment to this horse, and I was faced with how do I in a 2.5 acre pasture with a horse who wants nothing to do with me, how do I build this connection with her? And so that's where it started. And back then, there wasn't as many resources as there are now. We're so lucky now. I mean, to be able to have so many different places to send people to get help with horses who are like this now and not have to do it on their own. But I also am very grateful I did, because I I call it horse centric. And I was fully taught by Misa. I sat there with her and I figured out what worked, what didn't work. I let her guide me through this process, and I kind of deliberately steered clear of training modalities, because back then there was, again, not as much variety and range. And I really didn't want to get stuck in this is the way that it has to be done. I wanted to let her guide me. And so, I spent about 2 years really just diving deep with her. And we went, I mean, the amazing, the amazing things that we were able to accomplish together just in this communication developed over time. And it was interesting because at the end of those 2 years, I kind of was like, well, I really want to look into more of what it is that I'm doing, and see if there's anything I can do better, and, constantly trying to be able to level up, to be able to help her. And it was incredible diving into the world of positive reinforcement and just realizing, wow, all of these things that we had developed to be able to communicate have, they have terms, they have procedures that you go through. And it was all things that she had taught me. It was so special and so incredible. So that's kind of where I came to being a positive reinforcement trainer. And I utilize that. I do some blended training. I do take on, I try to meet the horse and the owner wherever they are. And over time, I like to kind of shift it over more towards positive reinforcement. But I really think that if I'm going to honor the horses in meeting them where they are, I need to do the same thing for the people too. And it's been really successful for me. I've been able to do some really beautiful blends with clients and with client horses, and kind of, it's been a great process for me unlearning the trauma that I have kind of gathered through traditional horsemanship in myself, and the way that I had kind of pushed it away so hard after a while because it really didn't feel right. And so learning how to feel into different approaches, and learning how to kind of make friends with that again and release some of my trauma, and learn how to be a more empathetic trainer in all realms, no matter what like learning quadrant we're in at the time. So
yeah. So one of the terms that I saw on your website that I was really like, oh, I like that a lot, was Lima. So least intrusive, minimally aversive.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's just the perfect encapsulation, whether you're using pressure release or clicker training or whatever it is you're choosing to bring that to the forefront. That just felt really good to see that. So can you tell me a little bit about how that came about, that term?
So I can't take credit for it.
I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a term that is, I actually am not sure the origin of it, but I learned it from the I think it's IIABC or IAABC, the International Animal Behavioral Consultants. And it was really great when I discovered that terminology, and I took a course on behavior modification through them, and just getting to really understand how to put kind of a ladder to how we're going to approach behavioral modification, which, I mean, in essence, everything we're doing is somewhat modifying behaviors, no matter how you're influencing it, whether it's, you know, even if it's energetic or spiritual, we're still influencing the world around us. And so learning how to start from, you know, the lowest possible, least intrusive and minimally aversive way of interacting with horses possible. And again, it's really about meeting the horse where they are in every single moment. And so you're constantly having to be aware and shift what you need based on the horse that you have in front of you at the moment, and not just saying like, well, this horse needs X, and not being willing to change, but being able to say, this is the horse that's in front of me right now. This is the horse that's in front of me right now. And being able to be flexible and understand what they need in those moments, and to be, you know, to be able to kind of retake control of our own knee-jerk reactions. I think that's something that, as a horsewoman who has had a lot of training before coming to, you know, a differing approach, to be able to kind of unlearn how to handle situations in that knee-jerk moment. The Lima approach has been really helpful in terms of being able to classify each progression and really have a good understanding of that from a conscious standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So when you are training and you're looking at it through that lens of this Lima concept, how might that impact, you know, a training process for you?
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me is learning how to look at a scenario and not just see the scenario that's unfolding in front of me, but also see all of the factors that led up to it, including horse care, you know, their daily life, their previous history, how they're feeling in that moment. You know, is this a horse who is coming from a place of lack? Do they feel like they have to guard resources, whether that resource is, you know, food, water, space, freedom, their friends, the people that they connect with? Is this a horse that's operating from a place of lack? If that is, I will do what I need to do to be safe in that moment, but I have firmly believed that we need to address that before we can step further. Like, I don't personally believe in training over underlying issues. I think that there are so many incredible trainers out there in the world, and I know that I can do this too. I can train a horse through dysfunction. I can train a horse through, you know, ulcers. I can train a horse through pain in their body. Horses will give so much. And if you know how to properly, or if not properly, effectively use training protocols, you can get them to do all sorts of crazy stuff. But that's not the point. To me, I've reached a point where I would rather go back to square one and not even take the horse out of the pasture until I have addressed all of their needs from a physical, emotional, and psychological standpoint before taking those next steps. So that was the base of Lima, is making sure that your horse has the wherewithal to participate in an activity with you. And so if that can be the base of all of our training, then we can eliminate so many training issues that we have. And so it's not necessarily just about being effective in how you apply your methodology. It's about making sure that the horse is able to operate from a place of wholeness and well-being before we even start applying a methodology.
So essential to have that perspective. And I read a post the other day, and it was, you know, stuff that we know now, but it was around this idea of dominance theory. And it was like, studies, the studies that they use, these horses had resource scarcity. They didn't have
Yes.
enough food. They were in paddocks where they didn't feel safe with their herd mates. They were fighting for resources and
Yeah.
dealing with other things. And yet we base this huge amount of horsemanship, becoming less and less, thankfully, on this understanding of these horses that are having very few, if any, of their needs truly met.
Yes, exactly.
And then trying to train those horses is obviously going to look very different than training a horse who has those needs met and is feeling safe in their body and connected, strong.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And even just as a bit of an example, I have one of my mare herds. I have a pasture track system. So one of my mare herds, they're kind of one of their hangout zones when it's really rainy is in my barn, which attaches to the track system. And it's I think it's a 24 by 48 zone that's, it's an open concept barn that they can hang out in. And they have a big hay net there. And at nighttime, when it's really cold, I hang hay bags with alfalfa in them. And of course, alfalfa is a high value food. They are very excited about it. And in any previous herd setup I had, if I were to try to put 5 hay bags full of alfalfa with a herd of horses, a herd of very strong-willed mares in that space, it would have just been, I would have been, asking for broken legs or, chunks taken out of them, just huge fighting happening. And with a herd that feels very safe in their space, they have all of their needs met in terms of movement. They have free access to various different types of forage all the time. And they truly feel centered, grounded, and they have their needs met. They can wander in and out. And I mean, last night I was watching them and I had my 2 mares who have the biggest personalities and really are very, they are willing to resource guard. They actually came from a space where I had to kind of rehabilitate them because they did have very high resource guarding behaviors. And, 11 months later, they're butt to butt and eating out of hay bags right next to each other with no problems whatsoever. They're milling about. And it's like, that's the space that I want my horses to be operating from. If I'm working with them 1 hour a day, I want the other 23 hours a day for them to be feeling grounded and settled and comfortable taking up space, but also comfortable allowing others into their space as well. And what I've found is the more they have their needs met, the more they fulfill themselves with their own connection too. So, a herd, yes, they're out together, but if they're constantly bickering over various resources, they're not getting what they need out of each other, which is that true connection to each other where they can uplift and the amount of emotional healing that comes from a really well-established herd is just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's so true. And it can change so quickly around resources. I know with my girls, it's like, if I'm not making sure that their forage needs are met, for example, they can go from really happy with each other to really unhappy with each other within a very short amount of time. And it's like, okay, they are giving me signals right away that they're not getting this particular need met in the way that they need to. And I just find that, I love that visual of your mare is just kind of high value yumminess, and they're chill and happy and cool with it.
Which is
beautiful.
so valuable when it comes to working with positive reinforcement too, because we don't want our horses to be engaging with us when we're utilizing positive reinforcement just because they don't have anything of value to look for food wise elsewhere, to make sure that you have the appropriate value of treat to be working with them. But also, I mean, I know horses who you could be using the most boring chopped hay of just like boring chopped teff hay, not even pellets, but just chopped hay. And they're like so frantic for it because, various different situations and scenarios. But I like to make sure that my horses are feeling full in every other way before working with them so that I know that they're engaging with me, not just because of the food, but because it's a conversation that we're having.
That's beautiful. So I definitely, reading on your website, it seemed like there are quite a few horses that come to you from situations that were less than ideal. And for you, I know that you work not just the physical, but also in the energetic and even spiritual spaces. What for you, if a horse came with a lot of trauma, a lot of heaviness in their body and their emotional space, what are some of the processes that you work with to support them through that?
Well, I feel really lucky in that the space that I've created is one in which I feel that the horses can kind of come in here and they can be held by, I love the phrase held by the herd. And I have multiple herds here, but they all interact with each other in this beautiful, energetic way. And so, even, if I have to have a horse here and quarantine them before introducing them to the herd or anything, the way I see them shifting in just being surrounded by all these horses who are so grounded and are so centered, it's like, I mean, it just radiates across the whole property. And I think that that's the greatest gift that I can offer them in the beginning, because some of the horses who come to me, people aren't an ease. There's not a lot of ease around human interaction. And so, allowing them the space to, I bring them their goodies and make sure that they're having their needs met. And then I can kind of sit back and just allow them to be held by the various herds here. And, ideally it can start to build some positive interactions with them before setting them out into the herd completely, just for ease of, making sure I can halter them before they come back. But for the most part, I really have found when it comes to horses who've experienced trauma, no matter what the degree of trauma is too, because I have some horses who have been through just horrifying situations and they are so open and so resilient and they bounce back so quickly. And I have some horses who had come from, what we would typically see as generally decent situations where maybe some of their needs weren't being met, but it caused, horrifying trauma with that in them that was really hard for them to bounce back. And then I've also had some horses who've had really horrifying abuse and it's, it has made a serious impact on them as well. And so allowing them to set the stage in terms of when they're open to connecting with me, and really looking at what they need from a holistic standpoint and being able to start immediately hit the ground running with meeting their needs, treating ulcers, getting their feet comfortable. Those are two of the biggest things I think in terms of just allowing them to have the foundation on which we can build comfort. And yeah, let's see, introducing a free foraging diet to them, so where they have food in front of them 24/7 so that they can begin to regulate and start feeling comfortable. That's one of the biggest shifts as well. Treating ulcers and starting free feeding is like, sometimes that's all it takes. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, for sure. That I've worked with many horses who have fear around not having enough food. Just the stress around that can be very, very impactful for them.
Yeah, definitely. And it can take a really long time for them to really feel confident and comfortable in trusting the process. I swear it helps so much having a herd that is well established. I have some horses who I think I started free feeding probably 2 years into. I've always had them before then, I always had them on pasture, but I really started understanding the importance of having, excess. I want them to always have excess so that it's not just that they feel like they have to graze. They can go and they can eat out of hay nets. They can go out and eat out of a different hay net if they want to. But yeah, I have two of my horses in this herd right now have been free fed for 6 years, and they just have such an easy confidence about everything. If the hay net runs out and they're out of food for a couple hours, they're so relaxed and they're not worried about it whatsoever. And that helps a lot with transitioning other horses and making sure that the horses that are new kind of pick up on what they're giving off, and it really helps the transition as well.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And where I'm imagining that you probably have body work on your horses at times. Where does that kind of land in your world as far as like what you find most helpful, what you've experienced with your horses as far as manual therapy and other body work?
Sure. Well, for a long time, the various horses that were in my herd were not necessarily open to traditional forms of body work. Like chiropractic is a lot for some horses who had trauma. And so for the longest time, I did a lot of just through my liberty work, exploring ranges of motion, increasing ranges of motion, really like bringing back that play and love of movement to the horse. That's honestly to this day still the biggest thing I like to give back, when it comes to rehabbing any horse, bringing back joy is, and having that connected to a person is really such a beautiful healing modality as well, because you can have a horse who can go through all the motions but doesn't really have joy and love for the motions that they're going through anymore. And that is one of the most detrimental things to do physically. And so being able to bring back that love of joy is kind of, when it comes to training, I like to constantly be training for healthy bodies, having healthy ranges of movement, having play unlock the various systems of the body so that they can really engage. And I had been diving into that and playing with that for years and having a lot of success. And there were some horses who just, I could feel there were little things that were holding them back from really unlocking their greatest potential. And one of the things that I've always faced living as remotely as I do is just not having a ton of resources for, various body workers. And it's getting better now, but it was slim pickings for a long time. And I actually, I think it was 2 years ago now, brought Celeste Leilani Lazarus up here or down here. She's up in Washington. I'm in Northern California, but brought her down and started working with her and had her work on all my horses. And one of my favorite things about that first time working with her was that she was totally willing to work with my horses at liberty and not push them past where they're comfortable or past their comfort level. And all of them were just like, oh, give it to me. Like, you can do anything with me. They just loved it. They loved her energy. And her work has been so crucial to, combining with my approach and her approach, and the way it blends together has just been seamless and beautiful. And their bodies have just unfurled. She talks about unfolding their wings and letting them really be able to fly. And I've just seen it with them. And she was so crucial to helping. My stallion had so many body issues when he arrived. He was a rescue too. And having her help me in that final year of his life it truly gave him wings. It allowed him so much comfort and ease in his body that he didn't have before. And being able to see that transformation and what we both learned from guiding him into better healing has been the trickle down effect and watching it help other horses has been so heartwarming. And it's, it's a legacy, and it's encouraged me to continue it on with all of my horses. And I just see such a huge difference in them immediately from beginning her work. And yeah, that's been a big part of the last couple of years, is really helping them. Again, it just folds right into the holistic approach, like looking at the whole horse and making sure that they're starting from a place of wellness and ease.
Yeah. Yeah. And wow, I love that. I've been a equine body worker for a long time now. And of course, if there's any equine body workers out there, or you felt the frustration of, you work on a horse, you come back a week later and everything's the same or worse or whatever, right? It's like, and this sense of our horses don't live in a vacuum. They're impacted by environmental factors, training factors, tensional patterns, rider balance, all these pieces that on its own body work can help. But I think I'm really seeing more and more addressing these other aspects is so critical on the whole horse journey, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had horses who I can take them out and give them as much correct training as possible, and and allow them to express themselves and move freely and have these beautiful play sessions, and then be riding them, being very cognizant of not overworking their bodies, and having healthy movement patterns, and then you put them back and they're so anxious and stressed from their and this usually comes with training horses, not with my own personal horses. And when it's my horses, I'll do anything I can to, before taking any further steps, I want to make sure that the 23 hours a day isn't undoing the 1 hour of work that I just did. And that's been a learning process for me too, in terms of only accepting training clients who are willing to go the full way and not just want to put band-aids on. Even people who are open to like what we'd call like ethical horsemanship practices, really open to positive reinforcement, open to like liberty work, open to, I want my horse to have all of this freedom. But if they're not willing to take all of the steps to address the horse at its baseline, when it's in its pasture with its herd or in a paddock, there's simply nothing that we can do to really meet those horses' needs until we address the root issues. And yeah, I mean, I've watched so many times, like work coming out and working with a horse, doing like a beautiful liberty session where we're working on, loosening up various body parts and opening up ranges of motion, and they feel so good. And then they go back into their paddock and they're like so tense all of a sudden because they don't have something else to focus on. And they just go right back into that body pattern that causes the stress patterns too. It's like, it's such a cycle, and it can be so hard to watch. And I know that I'm sure there's so many body workers out there who recognize that. Like you see you spend an hour working on a horse and they're like beautiful and soft and supple. And then you come back a week later and they're just like a little ball of wire. It's like, oh, it's so difficult.
Oh, it's the constant question of like, am I even being helpful like at all? I kind of lean towards yes, like in some way I'm meant to be here and I am, I'm going to be helpful as much as I can. But yeah, it makes for a heavy heart oftentimes, right? When you're working in particular environments where you're like, okay, I see like 5 things I would change about this, like right away. So yeah, I really thankful for you sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. And I told you before the podcast, I just started the body movement method masterclass a couple of weeks ago. really enjoying it. I have a mare that I am quite convinced now never unfurled from the time she was a foal.
Yes. Yeah. That's
Um,
surprisingly common. It's surprisingly common.
and I've been so racking my brain of like, what is it? And when I look back at her baby pictures, even now that I'm know what to watch for and see,
Mhm.
I can see it in her baby pictures.
Incredible.
And she was diagnosed with early onset arthritis at the coffin joint in her left front
Oh,
at 4.
oh my gosh.
And it's been such a journey. She has taught me so much about training and body work and just this interaction between those things. And because body work can only help so much, she has
Mm-hmm.
to learn to activate and
Yeah.
change her thoracic sling and use herself, which she's never done. So I met her as a body worker, and her sternum actually stuck out from her chest about
Oh my
like
gosh.
3 inches,
Oh.
maybe, like at a standstill, not when she's
Wow.
front end lifted, like,
Yeah.
and her whole thorax as an osteo, you can feel it, is completely was completely skewed, much better now.
Yeah.
But it made me think, oh yeah, no wonder like she wouldn't have had circulation even down that leg. The brachial plexus would have been so
Mm-hmm.
influenced. So yeah, I'm so excited about moving forward with this method of Celeste. And yeah, and I'm excited that you're using that with your horses as well, because it's sort of striking this nail on the head for me of,
Oh, I'm so glad.
you're right.
I'm so glad. It really has been life-changing for me and my horses and just watching, I mean, gosh, how many horses I've had my hands on that have changed under this method has just been like mind-blowing. It really is incredible. And it aligns so beautifully with all of the tenets of liberty work. And, I had I was thinking about it recently, before I met Celeste, one of my biggest things was the only bad movement is a repeated movement. And so, because I really do believe I don't believe in bad movement. I don't
Yeah.
think that there is anything that they can do that's bad. The more we open up their ability to explore the various ranges of motion that they have, if they go to the ends of their range of motion on a regular basis, then if
Yeah.
they spook and slip and something crazy happens, they're not going to tear it because they haven't gone there for the last 5 years. It's something that we want them to have a healthy range. And so I've never really jived with the idea of like demonizing a certain movement in its own. Of course, obviously there's like, again, and the bad movements are movements that are repeated. So like being behind the vertical and being held behind the vertical for, any length of time is not good. But a horse playing and moving and going behind the vertical isn't bad. It's like we
Yeah.
want to have these beliefs around what is good and what is bad. But again, it's really just about what's held and what is repeated. And what I realized just recently with Celeste's work is really at the heart of it, she's identified a pattern of movement that horses hold, especially like working through the brachiocephalic and kind of like collapsing down between
Mm-hmm.
their shoulder blades. And it's not that that particular thing is bad, it's just that it's being repeated. So it's like they can't break out of it. And so then it
Yep.
becomes that pathology of if the horse can't, turn that off, then it becomes bad. And so it's just realizing what she's doing is opening these horses up to a whole new range of motion and being able to have access to parts of their body that they had kind of just turned off before. It was really amazing realizing that from just
Mm-hmm.
shifting the lens a little bit and being like, oh, it aligns so perfectly with everything that I've been playing with. And
Mm.
I love that. And it's amazing too, because it also aligns with like all other types of work as well, dressage. And, there's a whole bunch of people who are doing like barrel racing with it and seeing incredible results. And it's just
Oh,
amazing how it seems to transfer and translate across all methods and approaches.
I found it really fascinating. So with Raven, one of the things I have never been able to do with her, which I like almost am ashamed to admit, but I can work around, we can work around. She cannot handle contact. So we can do target training and she'll drop her nose. We can do other things, but to actually ask for contact on a halter or a bride, like on a bitless bridle, so challenging for her.
Wow.
Always has been. And I kind of course, worked around it because she's so smart. She can do so many things. But the moment you go to ride, the next day, she's way more lame, way more uncomfortable. So yeah, what I realized with Raven is she can't relax her brachiocephalicus.
Wow.
She just can't. And so with that, she pushes away from contact, resists. And I do a lot of applied kinesiology. So one of the things we had learned in equine therapy school is to muscle test all the muscles to see which one's on, which one's off. So this course helped me so much to be like, okay, I'm just going to go through the thoracic sling. Brachiocephalicus off. It's not actually working properly. Pectorals off. Subclavian, like all of it. I was like,
wow.
Okay. And after we do the body movement method, even just a little tiny bit that's not perfect at all, it all turns back on again.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then, within like 5 or 6 hours, it all turns off again. But I'm like, it's something, it's going to come over time. And she's been more willing. One of the things we play with a lot is we have a huge tire in our paddock. She loves to jump on it.
Oh.
And so we play with that a lot. And it helps her a lot in her. It's like this release through her body.
Yeah.
But just recently, after doing just literally a few days of this, she was able to actually jump with her back feet up. She'd never been able to do that. She's always put her front feet up and then back down. So now she can actually go up. It's about 2.5 feet tall.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Then walk over with her back feet.
Sure.
And I was like, very cool. Like just little things where you're seeing activation and neuroplasticity and just this change in what the brain knows it's capable of.
Yes. And that is the root of, that's really the root of it, is because again, we talk about when the horse goes into a state of not feeling capable, whether it's not having their needs met, or they feel that their body itself isn't capable, or they feel like they need to constantly be on to protect themselves. The body is so limited to that state. And then as soon as you start, showing the body what it is capable of and going like, you can do this, and empowering them. And really what that does for a horse, for a non-predatory power animal, like for it not to be a predator, this horse is constantly having to make sure that they are keeping themselves safe in the world. And what is the safest thing for a horse is an empowered body. And the amazing things that will unlock in a horse when their body feels capable and strong, and that they have access to all of it, that you're kind of like unlocking that next level. They're just so much more confident and comfortable, and they feel so much more secure in trying new things and exploring their bodies more, which is of course a positive feedback loop. It's the more they're more comfortable they are exploring their bodies, the more their bodies become comfortable with exploration. And it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm excited for what's to come for her. She's
Me too.
8 this year, and I'm like, okay, like here we go. We're on a path that feels like really right for her journey forward, which is so exciting to feel. And I find it so fascinating to look at my other mare, who's 23 now, but loves contact, like is so like comfortable with contact, and honestly has never had a lame day in her life, knock on wood, right? And I'm like, isn't that so interesting that she uses herself so well? And she's confident in her body and her movements. And yeah, it's so, so interesting. So I'm
Wow, I love
excited
that.
moving forward with that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get into, Tara, a little bit around, I know you've been in a grieving process, and I was looking through your Instagram and just so moved by the process you've been in and how you've shared about it as well. I think is so profound. I saw the photos of your stallion, and I talk a lot in my book about like honoring and legacy
Mm-hmm.
and what that means. And I saw the photos of him just adorned.
Yeah.
And it was so moving for me because it's so rare for us to see
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Just honoring him in
mm,
I wanted to honor him every day of his life. And I felt it was equally important to honor him after he had passed, on this day. I wanted to look back and be able to remember him in all of his beauty and all of his glory.
mm,
And I really felt it wasn't intentional, but during the process of, sitting with him and, um, I had this really profound moment of laying with my head on his shoulder and feeling like I could hear him returning to the earth, the
mhm,
silence of this body being slowly returned, the process of being returned to the earth already, and sitting with him as that process began, shifting into this new space that we were going to inhabit together, my memory with him and the flowers and being able to sit there and adorn him. I think it took probably an hour and a half doing
mhm,
that. And I didn't realize until afterwards how much the intentions of, adorning him was such a powerful process. And it really helped me to be able to sit there and sit with him. And I mean, yeah, and it just, I can't help but wish that every horse had that. I felt that so strongly in those
mhm,
moments of every horse deserves this kind of a send off to be able to be honored in this way. He made such a huge difference in my understanding of horses and my understanding of training and my understanding of connection. And that has continued even after his passing, like his legacy of teaching me how to continue to connect and to continue to honor him as I did every day when he was alive, to be able to continue that afterwards, which I just don't think I'd had that. I don't think I had ever had anything that had made me feel like that before. Um,
mm,
and I I struggled because I tend to I'm not religious and this uh, feeling like he was so just it was so final and he was gone and being this feeling of I'm never going to see him again, and not having any sort of belief to hold me to this idea of like that I will see him again. I think that there's a lot of comfort that can come from that, and I felt really lost not having that. And in the days following, being completely shocked and blown away by the amount of connection I still felt with him, and realizing like even though he's gone, there is something to his spirit that has continued to live on. And that, I mean, I see him and feel him everywhere all the time, and it's
mhm,
so I wasn't something that I was expecting, and it was really It's been both incredibly beautiful and also incredibly difficult, because it's a constant reminder of both his presence, but also the lack of physical presence.
Yeah. With those big spirits, it's can be, yeah, profound and challenging. Yes.
Yeah.
I noticed in your adornment, you gave him a unicorn horn.
I did.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
it's, he just had he had this incredible otherworldly nature to him. And
Yeah.
I just felt it was fitting that he would be adorned in such a way. And that's how I've always seen him, as this kind of larger than life being, something beyond what is the usual. He was so special. And yeah, he deserved it. That's for sure.
Wow. I, if you're open to it, we have about 10 minutes left. And if you're open to sharing about your process of I don't know if it was something that happened because it was sudden or something that you chose, sort of the timing of. If you're open to sharing a little bit more, I know this is an area for so many people that is so challenging to make a call like that, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, I've never had to make that call before. And yeah, it was the hardest decision of my life. He he had melanoma. He was gray. He was a gray Andalusian stallion, and he came to me with melanoma, and mild, nothing too crazy, but you can keep an eye on it. And um, he had issues in his body that um, Celeste and I both believe that he did have some internal tumors that
Yeah.
were causing some issues, but nothing that we couldn't overcome and help him through. And then started to kind of have there was just a difference in the quality of our connection. Like there was something was there. There was a presence there that wasn't there before. And over the course of about 6 weeks, he went downhill really hard. And we couldn't figure out what was wrong at first. I knew that there was something wrong. He was having extreme behavior changes. And this is a horse who I had worked so hard to give him the gift of connection with other horses, that he re-socializing him and giving him a herd that he loved so much. And seeing him coming out in the morning and seeing him drenched in sweat from having run around panicked in the middle of the night because he was so freaked out by the other horses that were near him, having to separate him, trying to figure out what was going on. I had a lot of people saying, well, he's just a stallion, it's just hormones. And I'm like, this is not stallion behavior. If you think this is stallion behavior, you need to either address how you're keeping your stallions, or you need to spend time with more balanced stallions. And it was getting to the point where he was running through fences, and it was just so extreme, and it was so not like him. And I kept pushing to try to figure out what was going on. And it turned out he had a melanoma in his eye, and he had other melanomas that were popping up as well. He was having a hard time eating, and he's having a hard time drinking. And so we didn't do a necropsy, but I believe that he had more melanomas in his head area. And so being faced with the options that I had, there were relatively limited options, but I could have tried to have his eye removed. He didn't trailer. He would immediately go neurological when he stepped onto a trailer and lose all ability to balance. He flipped over, he hit his head, knocked himself unconscious one time. It was just, after that, I promised him I wouldn't trailer him anywhere. And again, these promises we make to these horses. I have possibly like, I don't know, sedated him up the wazoo and put him on a trailer and gone somewhere and try to take his eye and try to get him back here. But again, it's like this is a 17-year-old stallion who has been through a lot in his life. And I made these promises to him. And I know that he was suffering. He was so stoic, and to see how bad it got at the end, and to know there were options that I could have taken to prolong his life, but it was just for me. And I had a really incredible conversation with an incredible woman who walked me through, is his life gonna get better after this? Will you be able to have him in turnout anymore with his herd? Will he be able to be comfortable? Is he ever gonna have better days than he had before? And realizing that the answer was no, and that the kindest thing I could do was to let him go. And I went back and forth so many times on what to do. The idea of like, maybe I could just wait and see if it gets better, or I could keep him isolated, because if he's isolated and he doesn't see any other horses, he doesn't get triggered, but that he's still in pain. And putting him on all these pain meds and seeing none of it was helping, and just realizing that it truly was the kindest thing to do was to let him go with dignity and have some good days, to up the pain meds to a point where he could have a couple days at that level and enjoy his time. He got to spend some time with his son and his baby mama, and flirt with her and hang out for another couple of days and spend some time in the sunshine. And he was so ready. That walk, and walking away from his herd and going back to the spot where he was going to be buried. It was the hardest walk for me, and he led the way. It was
he beelined.
He made a beeline for it, and he was so calm, and he just had this aura.
Yeah.
I don't regret it for a moment, because I know that it was the right decision, but God, it was really hard.
So hard to let them go.
And I'd only had him for 2.5 years, and it just felt like I thought he was going to be an old man with me, But I think sometimes with a horse like that has so much to teach you and so much to give, they burn too brightly. They can't. I couldn't see him now being an old man. Like, he just had this fire and tenacity, and I think it would have broken his heart to be old and frail. And he was just such a king, and so gentle and so sweet. And I'm really glad that he got to return back to that for a little while before he left. And it was really amazing getting to see him interacting with his son, who was, I think he was 4 months old at the time, and he was just so gentle with him, and it was really beautiful.
How amazing that his legacy continues as well.
He had 2 babies that spring before he passed, and the biggest blessing was that neither of them inherited the gray gene, which is small mercies.
Yes. Thank goodness. Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not easy to bring it back up, but sometimes talking about it can be good too.
It's important. And I think for the longest time I shied away from anything that would bring up feelings like this, that to be able to have a conversation and cry and not feel bad about it or feel like it's something I should shut away. That's been another gift that he's given me, of just learning to make friends with it in a sense, and to recognize it as the process and part of the gift of having them in our lives is this price that we pay, but that there's lessons to be found in it, and that there's beauty and profound lessons in that. I think that because he was such a big part of my life, I couldn't stop talking about him, and realizing that talking about it and talking about him and talking about the grief process and being open about it was so much more. I felt like I was honoring him by not shutting it down, which is something I've always done. I've lost family members before, and I've lost pets, and I've lost friends, and obviously all incredibly hard, difficult choices, or not choices, but experiences. But the choice that I would always make to just be like, I'm fine, it's okay. And part of that's just my protection mechanism that I have to say like, nope, I again, coming from that place of lack, resource guarding in a sense of, I need to be strong, I need to be fine, I need to not talk about this horrible feeling, and it weighs so much heavier on your heart when you don't talk about it. And if there's anything that I learned from sharing the beautiful life that I shared with him on social media, was that it gives people permission to enjoy when they're alive. And that was amazing, getting to share his life with people, and to be able to share in his death, and to be able to share in the grieving process is equally as beautiful and important. And I think that that's another part of his legacy too, that talking and sharing and honoring all of our grief is a necessary and beautiful part of it, the way it connects people.
Yeah. I love that phrase. Grief is love. Grief is love.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, it shows that we were in it.
Yeah.
And our hearts were in it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also know about grief, it's, for you probably had the experience that it kind of opened the floodgates. So, all that grief that I didn't let out.
Yeah.
Those other moments, those other experiences. It's all moving now, which is so often the case, right? If we've shut ourselves down from that feeling, it's there, just waiting for an opportunity to heal and move and find its way.
One of the things that I would always say about the horses is, they're designed to move through their emotions. They're designed to have an emotion to move, and it flows through them, and it leaves their body, and it doesn't sit there and coagulate and
fester and
yes, and just collect dust and block everything up. And so allowing the horse to move through their emotions, and an emotion that's not allowed, an emotion that's shut down doesn't disappear, it just sits there in the body. And that's something that I've thought about a lot in this, of, if I can allow this to keep moving, I can allow it to not, take hold in my own body. And sometimes it's kind of tempting to do that, because it's in some ways easier, but also one of his greatest lessons that he's always shown me had been, the easiest route isn't the way forward. It's, you find the route that in your heart, you follow your North Star, you keep on moving, you keep on following that path, even if it is the hardest path. And just keep on moving, keep on letting it flow.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and about him. And it feels like, yeah, okay. Legacy work again, sharing this because it is such a hard process for so many of us. And I think the more we talk about it, it's never going to get easier.
No.
But maybe we'll feel less alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the ultimate uniting experience. We've all been there, and if we can all connect through it, that's, yeah, again, the legacy you said.
Well, coming to the end of our conversation today, and it's been a beautiful one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this container to go through all of this. I appreciate it so much.
Oh yeah, ditto, absolutely. And it's really, well, you can see I'm teary, and there's, I can feel it. I know one day I'll be there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But
it'll
right
be
now
good.
you're here.
Well, now I'm here, and it's good to know that people have gone through this and you've lived. You're okay.
Yes. Yeah. You survived. Yes.
Yeah, because
Survived to pour our hearts into another horse yet again.
right. So yeah, losing a horse so close to your heart. I mean, anyone so close to your heart is excruciating, but it's good to know that we can come through the other side and we can find, our way with them in a different form,
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, lovely. Yeah. Deep breath, everyone. Might have a few of you out there crying, I'm thinking, with this one. Oh, well, Tara, how do people get in touch with you? How do they find you and your work?
Let's see. You can find me on Instagram at Unbridled Goddess. I have a Facebook at Unbridled Goddess, or you can send me a friend request, Tara Davis. Pretty much all horse people. And then my website is www.unbridledgoddess.com. I'll have new offerings on there to be able to work with me in conjunction with Celeste Balance their movement method. I do some distance sessions on there, so I'll have in the next couple of weeks I'll have a link on there to book some distance sessions, and yeah.
Wonderful. Yay. Thank you again for being here and taking the time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
It's been wonderful. And thank you for all of you listening in. I hope you, felt something, learned something today, and I'll look forward to seeing you for another episode coming up soon. Bye for now.